CQ, CQ, CQ. This is Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, and you are listening to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. My name is Curtis. My call sign is Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, and I'm the host for this podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about emergency communications, and more specifically, training involved in emergency communications. You can find the show notes for this episode at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/9. That's the number 9. Today's episode is going to be dedicated to a good friend of mine. His name was Tim Hagley. His call sign was Kilo Echo 5 Echo Zebra November, or Echo Zulu. No, that's not even right. Kilo Echo 5 Echo Zulu Mike was his call sign. I've known him for probably 15-20 years, something like that. And unfortunately, he became a silent key much too young this last Friday on the 11th. About a year ago or so, he was diagnosed with colon cancer, and he slowly went downhill and unfortunately lost his battle early Friday morning. Tim was a very awesome guy. He would always be one of the first ones to volunteer his time. If you needed help, he was always there to give it. He was just a really nice guy, and Tim, you will be missed. So this episode is dedicated to you. So in this episode, like I said, we're going to be talking about emergency communications and the training that goes into emergency communications. Now, some people have said, or I've heard in the past, that whenever a disaster strikes, basically, all hell breaks loose. Basically, excuse my French, but and it's just like maybe a controlled chaos. Unfortunately, we really can't run like that anymore. I've had experiences, especially as a 911 dispatcher. I've had experiences where an incident or a large-scale incident was a very uncontrolled chaos, and I've had instances where it was very controlled. Everybody knew their jobs. Everybody knew what they were supposed to do. And it just ran so much more smoothly. So, how do you get this nice control? Well, that's kind of where the training and the role playing, I guess maybe you could say, or the drills come into play. Okay, you can only learn so much from training courses, but actually getting out there and doing stuff is where you're going to learn quite a bit too. Back several years ago, back before 9/11, and I've touched on this before, the training program for what was then called the Incident Command System was not really a required training for anybody to take. I mean, it was mainly for first responders or the officers of the first responders. It was encouraged for other people to take, but it wasn't a requirement. So after 9/11 and the conception of Homeland Security, a new incident command system was put into place called NIMS, the National Incident Management System. Now, NIMS is a emergency protocol, I guess you could say, that everybody goes by. Before this system was in place, you had people that would do things one way here and do it a different way somewhere else. So it wasn't standardized. Well, now with NIMS it is standardized. And if you're going to be a first responder, or you're going to be a responder to an incident, you have to have a certain level of training before you can even go into the incident. Now, that training, and I will have links to all of these training courses that I'm talking about. Any links like this I'm going to have in the show notes, so you can go on over there and just click on them. The NIM system has made an online course, or courses, covering a wide variety of topics. But the bare minimum that you should take is the IS-100 and the IS-700A. They're basically introduction courses to what the NIM system is, and how it works. Now, that's just the bare minimum that Homeland Security or FEMA requires. Some agencies, some BRACES organizations, or emergency operations departments require more. If you are going to be part of the command team, you will need more. And there's, like I said, there's links on the show notes, but if you're going to be a part of the command team, you also need to have IS-200 and IS-800. So if you're part of the command team, you need 1, 2, 7, and 8. If you're just a average Joe Smo that's going to be helping, you need at least 1 and 7 as far as the NIMS requirement. Your local organization may require different things, so check with them and make sure that you get all that training done. So if you just go out and you take these courses, yeah, okay, you will have maybe the basic understanding of what's going on, okay, but you also need more than that, though. You need a time where you can put what you read to use. I don't know about you, but yeah, I could read stuff and I can learn stuff, but actually doing it kind of like cements it in my head. If I don't do it, yeah, I might remember it. I might remember it, a year down the road or whatever, but more than likely, probably not. And so that's where this hands-on training comes into play. We have, here in my local area, we have an annual drill for the DFW Metroplex. We have one for the state. And actually here in the county, we actually have a couple departments that will do a full-blown, full-scale, day-long event on, say, like a tornado came through a city. And they have people that play the victims that are hurt, and different things, and we'll participate in that. Well, part of the thing that we do as communicators is we have to set up communications if the communications go down. So let's say that you're told to go to Shelter A and set up a communications link back with the command personnel or whatever. Now, as a ham radio operator, you know how to communicate, I would hope. You know the basics of setting up a station. But if you have never used the equipment that you're using, or you've never been to the place that you're going to be going to, or you don't have the right equipment or whatever, then not practicing it is going to slow you down. So you may have, like, if I'm going to shelter A, and I'm going to set up communications. Okay, so I get there, I get my radio unpacked, I get my antenna unpacked, and then I have to figure out where I'm going to set it up. Well, you can't just set it up anywhere because there's like a chain of command, okay? And if you don't read the IS 100 and 700, you're not going to really know that. I mean, yeah, you might probably have an idea, and I'm sure that whoever told you to go there will say, once you get there, talk with person X and find out where they want you to set up or whatever. But you know that there's some kind of chain of command, so you have to go and find the person who's in charge of that shelter, and tell them who you are, and of course you have to have your ID badge, and find out where they want you to set up. And where they want you to set up might not be ideal, it might not be practical, but you need to know that. So let's say that they actually do give you a decent spot, and this spot is next to a window or next to a door, or you have some easy way to get your coax out of the room that you're in. So here's an easy way to get it out. You can stick it through a window, stick it through a door. Yeah, it's not the most ideal because it could harm your coax, but at least you'll be able to get it out and get a signal out in relatively short form or short fashion. But let's say that they don't give you a good spot. I mean, are you going to have enough coax to get your antenna out? Are you going to have a way to go through a closet to get out? Or, all these things come to mind on not being able to set up a station. Are you going to have power? Is there even going to be power? You might be running off of a battery or a solar cell or something like that the entire time that you're there. So you have to know how to set all this stuff up. And if you just go there during a disaster, I mean, it's going to be chaos. They're going to have people running around. They're going to have victims coming in, trying to get information, trying to find loved ones, trying to get help for themselves, whatever. So you're not going to have the time to, just kind of mosey around and set up your station. The people that are there at the shelter might be waiting on you to get your stuff together so that they can call the home base and say, hey, I need some more medication here, or I need some more blankets here, or I need some more water here. And time is of the essence, so you really need to figure out what you're doing, get it done, get it over with, get it up on the air so that you can go about what you're there for. So, during these drills, it's important that you participate. It's important that you try to think of any possible problems that you might have and figure out what it is that you need to add to your GoPack or add to your radio system or add to your antenna that's going to make your life easier. Okay? And one of the things that probably will make it easier is going to be a GoPack, and we're going to be talking about about GoPacks here in the next couple weeks. I think I have it scheduled for the 29th of this month, so the last Tuesday of the month we're going to be talking about GoPacks. I found a whole bunch of really nice ones, so come back to that episode and have a listen. I think it's going to be a pretty good one. But I guess that's is pretty much about it for training. Just remember, you're never too old to learn something. You should always be learning. I mean, if you don't learn, you're gonna, shrivel up and die or whatever. But, always be learning something, always be troubleshooting, always trying to think of the worst case scenario, especially when you're doing a drill. Figure out what you need and make changes accordingly. And, most of all, have fun. That's what this hobby is about. If you're not having fun, then you're going to be sitting there for your 2-hour shift or your 4-hour shift, and it's just going to be dragging by. So, just remember, we're there to help out the community. We're there to we're there to provide a service. And yeah, it might always be fun. Yeah, it might be boring, and it probably will be. Especially the longer that you're there. The day 3 versus day 1 is going to be a lot different. You're going to have less traffic. You're going to have longer periods between traffic. You might not have anybody there with you anymore. You might be tearing down and going home. Who knows? So practice makes perfect. Try to figure out what to do, how to do it, when to do it, where to do it. Try to think of any kind of issues that you might have trying to set up the station. Try to think outside the box, basically, and go from there. So I guess that's about it as far as training goes. Just do what we do. We're there to communicate, and even though that we may not always have the right ideas or always have the right answers, we're amateur radio operators. We can get the job done, especially during disaster times. So go out and figure it out. So I guess we're going to move on to the next topic of this podcast, our amateur radio spotlight, which this week we are having it on the Hark DC Amateur Radio Club. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. In this episode for the Amateur Radio Club Spotlight is going to be over the Hack DC Amateur Radio Club. That's the HAC DC Amateur Radio Club. It's in Washington, D.C. And Hack DC is maybe a little bit different than most clubs are. They're a loosely organized group of hams in Washington D.C. That's the way that they define themselves. They have regular meetings on the second Wednesday of the month at 7:30 p.m. And they have irregular, unorganized meetings on the fourth Wednesday of the month. It's probably at the same time at 7:30, but I'm not sure because it doesn't say on their website. And their fourth Wednesday meeting is, from what I understand, just basically like a show and tell type thing, or something like that. It says that you can bring items to show off. So it's just kind of like a rag chew session, maybe, or something like that. They meet on the third floor of the St. Stephen's and the Incarnation Episcopal Church at 1525 Newton Street Northwest. It's going to be at the intersection of 16th Street and Newton, in the Mount Pleasant, Columbia Heights area of Washington, D.C. That's kind of a mouthful. They hold weekly nets on Monday nights at 9 p.m. and are currently using a temporary frequency of 145.110, one of the repeaters there in Washington, D.C. area. I believe they changed it temporarily because of some kind of antenna issue. So, but if you're listening to this podcast in a later episode, they might have gone back to a different frequency. So check their website, check the show notes for a link to that, to their website. Their website is actually w3hac.org. if you want to just go straight there, or go to the show notes and click through that. This club appears to be a very active club, especially in on-the-air events like National Parks on the Air, QSO parties, D-expeditions, things like that. As I was going through their website, they had a lot of articles about contests, the D-expeditions, stuff like that. They actually had probably one of the first contacts for the National Parks on the Air. And they actually did it with another ham, AE5DW. That's Alpha Echo 5 Delta Whiskey. He's actually a host for the Amateur Radio Newsline podcast. So they actually had like a recording of this QSO that happened shortly after 0 UTC time on January 1st, 2015. He actually made a recording of this and was on an episode of the Amateur Radio Newsline podcast. I don't have a direct link to that. I'll see if I can find it and include it in the show notes. So if you want to listen to that episode of the Newsline to hear that probably first QSO of the National Parks on the Air event, you can head on over and do that. So I guess that about wraps it up for this episode. Again, amateur or emergency training, very important for any type of communications or a major event, disaster. Training is very important. Role playing, drills, stuff like that. So, if your club doesn't do it, I highly recommend that you do that. The spotlight for this episode, the HAC DC Amateur Radio Club. You can find them at w3hac.org, or you can find them on Facebook at facebook.com/hamradiodc. So head on over and check them out. Tell them I sent you, and I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So we will be right back. So before we close for this episode, I just want to kind of take a little personal side note here. First off, I want to thank everybody that has downloaded my podcast episodes. Thank you for sticking with me. We are coming up on the first double-digit episode. Next week will be number 10. I have crossed the dreaded number 7 episode for podcasts. That's like, for some reason, the 7th episode is the hardest to get past through on podcasts from what I've read through different training things. So I've made it past number 7, almost to the double digits. I'm fastly approaching 2,000 downloads total, so I want to thank everybody for that. If this episode sounds a little lower, a little maybe downbeat than normal, I kind of wanted to explain that. As we said in the top of this episode, I lost a good friend of mine last Friday. Last Friday on the 11th. A fellow ham, a fellow volunteer firefighter, always there to help. He was a really great guy, and he was taken before his time. So this episode is dedicated to him. On the homeward side, on the homebound side, or something like that. If you've gone to my website and you've looked at the About Me page, you'll know that I'm a foster parent. This week I had one of my foster daughters thankfully go home for her. She was a great girl. She will be missed. I think our family was done really wrong on how she went home. It was just a couple days notice that we had to get her stuff ready and say goodbye. And she was picked up from school and I didn't get to see her the last day before she left, so it was a little hard on me, and I'm still kind of working through the emotions, I guess you could say. Like I said, she was a great girl, and we will miss her terribly. Unfortunately, that'll probably be the last time that we see her, and it's hard. It's hard sometimes. I get asked, or I talk to somebody about foster care, and they always say, I couldn't do that. I couldn't fall in love with a kid and then have them sit home. But to me, it's just the opposite. I ask myself, how can I not? How can I not provide a stable home for a kid that needs one? And how could I not love those kids that may not know love, that were taken from their parents for whatever reason and put into somebody's house that they have no idea? I mean, you figure it's like, how would you like to go to somebody's house that you don't know, walk in and say, hey, I'm here to live with you, and not know them, not know whether they're going to take care of you or not. So it's kind of a tough thing, a very sad thing sometimes. But we've had a lot of good memories, and maybe one day I will see her again, since she does live in the same county as where I live at. So maybe I will see her again. Maybe I will get to give her a hug and stuff. But last night was really hard for my wife and I. And today is kind of tough too. But I needed to get this episode recorded, so I apologize if I seem a little downbeat or a little lower than normal. But I really wanted to get this out for my listeners. So I guess that is going to about wrap it up. I'm going to go ahead and close for this episode. Next episode, we're going to continue on with emergency communications. We're actually going to talk more specifically about the communications aspect of it rather than just the training. And I hope that you will come back. I hope that you will download the next episode. And I guess that's about it. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I do want to mention, if you have a club that you want to have highlighted on this podcast, send me a email to Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, that's K5CLM, at everythinghamradio.com. Include your club name, the website address, and any other pertinent information about your club that you want me to highlight or specifically talk about during this segment. And maybe you'll get selected for one episode. Right now, it's just randomly chosen from the ARRL affiliate club listings. So yeah, so please send me a link to your website. Let me check out your club and give you a little publicity, I guess you could say. So I guess that about wraps it up. So hey everybody, once again I'd like to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. If you like what you heard here, head on over to our website. There's lots of information there that I'm sure you're going to love. You can find it at everythinghamradio.com. While you're there, subscribe to get emails on when I publish a new post or a new podcast. You can click on the subscribe button at the top of the page, or go there directly at everythinghamradio.com/subscribe. Also, like me on Facebook at facebook.com/everythinghamradio, and follow me on Twitter at K5CLM. Also, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe to this podcast, like it, share it with your friends, help me spread the word. So until next time, 73.